So welcome to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad's Zoom call. Tonight's topic is on education beyond high school, and I'm thrilled that we're joined by a couple of experts, if you will, people that know not just an average amount of this, but at it in a more meaningful way. And in fact, one of our couples not only has been involved with starting a program, but also have two children of their own that have special needs. So what I'd like to do is have each of the presenters make a brief self-introductory remarks about who they are, where they live, what their connection to the special needs community is, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the work that they do. So we're going to go to Skip and Gayle Gianopulos, and Skip is podcast dad number 3. The Zoom stage is yours, Gianopulos.
Thank you, David. And yes, let me just preface this by saying I am not an expert on post-high school educational options for kids with special needs. Our oldest, we have 2 daughters with special needs. Our oldest is actually a senior in high school. The expert is sitting right next to me, and she's actually started a program for post-high school educational opportunities for those with intellectual disabilities. So just a little bit of background on me. I am a dad of 4 girls, 2 of which have special needs, daughters number 2 and 4. Our oldest daughter with special needs has Down syndrome, and her name is Jessica. Our youngest one with special needs, her name is Cassidy. And in addition, she also has Down syndrome, but in addition to Down syndrome, she is also on the autism spectrum as well. My wife, Gayle, as I mentioned earlier, started a program at Judson University called RISE. And RISE stands for
The Road to Independent Living, Spiritual Formation, and Employment. So Judson University is a faith-based college, and so that's why there's the spiritual formation component, but it's a do you want me to go into the program?
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about that later, but I just wanted Gayle to introduce herself.
Yeah. I'm the mom of the 4 girls.
Well, thanks for the brief introduction. Glad you could join us. Richard Allegra from AHEAD. Please introduce yourself and a little bit about AHEAD as well.
Sure. Thank you for having me join this. And as I was telling David before when we were chatting, I've been in the field of disability for decades, 40 some years. I have a degree in rehabilitation counseling from San Francisco State University, and have worked with disabled adults, young adults, originally working with deaf individuals who were refugees from other countries who came over during some of the first waves from Vietnam and different places. And then I got into higher education work in 1989 when I moved to Minnesota and started working at the University of Minnesota. And that was just before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed and enacted. So everything that we kind of learned at that time was turned upside down, and we started to implement some of the things that we needed to do. In 2003, I started working with AHEAD, the Association on Higher Education and Disability, as their professional development director. And AHEAD is made up of members who are disability services coordinators at colleges and universities and other post-secondary programs around the country. So my job was to put on conferences, webinars, phone conferences back then before Zoom, and workshops, different kinds of things, and training folks on things like the ADA, as well as technologies, access technologies, addressing things like new accommodations that were coming up, but also putting on workshops, just like said for their children, workshops related to autism and students with intellectual disabilities. That I told David back when ADA was enacted, a lot of us in the field thought, okay, now there's this law and we're done. Everything's going to be accessible. But here we are in 2021, still doing this because things keep evolving and changing. It, 6 years ago, I had received a federal grant to create the National Center for College Students with Disabilities. That's that NCCSD, my name. And the Higher Education Act was reauthorized in 2008. And it included a provision that there be a national technical center for parents and others to learn about college and transition and everything related to college. And of course, Congress didn't fund that until 2015. There was a big RFP, a request for proposals, and I had won that, and we set up the NCCSD. And through that, my work has kind of gone full circle, and now I'm working primarily with students and parents, high school personnel, others who are looking for resources and help in the transition from high school to college. And hearing all kinds of stories from students, pre-college, in college, parents who are having difficulties or just looking for resources who are disconnected. So it's been actually wonderful for my career. I've had like 2 jobs without having to interview for the second job. So it's wonderful to be doing this work. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Richard, thanks for joining us. So it's crystal clear to me that we're going to have 2 angles on this issue of education beyond high school for those with disability. We're going to get the top-down approach from Richard and the work that he's been doing with AHEAD. And then we're going to get the what I call the grassroots approach with a sample of a program that is taking place. And it's just a few years old, so it's really fresh, it's really new. There seems to be a lot of energy around it, and that's the RISE program that the Gianopulos are involved with. So going back to you, Gayle and Skip, why don't you give us a little background on how the RISE program has come about, what's the backstory, and what have you been able to accomplish in the first few years?
Yeah, well, I would say both Gayle and I had a great college experience, really enjoyed ourselves, really being kind of the first time being independently living. And both of us just grew so much during that period of time. And really, Gayle was, there was a sadness in Gayle that she was kind of mourning that loss for our kids with special needs. She didn't feel like she felt that might not be an option for them. And so, started journaling about this from when our kids were really young. And as she was thinking through that, I don't want to put words in her mouth, and she can tell you in a moment, but, just thought, why does that need to happen? And so Gayle took the idea and presented it to the president of the university she graduated from, Judson University. And really, to her surprise, got a wonderfully warm welcome to that idea. In fact, Dr. Kroom said not only yes, but he said, why aren't we doing this already? He did leave us with a caveat and said, yes, this sounds like a great idea. All you now have to do is go raise the money to start it, like any good delegator and executive. But we did put together a little video, and David, if it's all right, maybe we could just share that. That might give us a little context from which to start with. And I will start this video, and it's only a couple of minutes.
Once upon a time, there was a family. A father, a mother, and 4 daughters, 2 of whom were born with Down syndrome. When looking at her 4 children, the mother was amazed that her oldest daughter with Down syndrome loved going to school, learning new things, and socializing with her classmates. More importantly, she didn't just love school, but like her sisters, she enjoyed her independence and had a passion for God. Now, the mother had hopes that all of her daughters would continue learning after high school by pursuing higher education. But for her 2 daughters with Down syndrome, choices were limited. Roughly 5% of U.S. post-secondary institutions had programs that her daughters could participate in, and only a small number of those institutions were faith-based. She thought to herself, everyone can learn, they just need an opportunity. Everyone wants to belong, and everyone needs experiences that help them realize their potential. Wanting the best for her children, she hatched a plan to approach her alma mater, Judson University, and they loved the idea. A full year of research, fundraising, meetings, organization, and recruitment, a new faith-based special needs program was born. The RISE program. RISE was founded to do just what the mother had hoped: create opportunities for learning, foster an environment where everybody belonged, and give room for experiences for everyone to realize their potential. The 2-year program launched and immediately created a tremendous impact on Judson's students, staff, and faculty. After gaining a strong reputation and leaving students with a desire for more, the RISE program continued to grow. With the addition of the 3rd year into the program, more and more opportunities open for students with intellectual disabilities to belong, learn, and realize their potential in a faith-based community. There's always more room to grow. With future plans of adding a 4th year, we need support. We want to build spaces for students to continue to grow in their independence, spaces where they can practice their culinary skills, where they can launch their own businesses, and where they can become better connected to their community. Whether you're interested in dedicating time, manpower, or supplies, looking for a worthy financial investment, or are willing to join us in prayer for the future of our program, RISE needs partners like you. Because when we work together, we can make a brighter future for everyone.
Leave it right there.
Well, let me just say before you get started, thank you for sharing. Very creative. I love the egg hatching the idea. I love the change of seasons with the passage of time, with the, raising money, getting organized. And then the man with the tape measure about growing. I thought whoever put that together, my kudos, very creative. So thank you for sharing. And I think it, it tells a story in a unique way, easy to understand, and it's very engaging.
Yeah, and we'll get a copy of that to you if you wanted to post it as a resource for people to watch it that aren't maybe watching the YouTube. But yeah, so Gayle is really the brains behind the operation. Like I said earlier, I have 0 experience in terms of post high school education in going through that with kids with special needs. But Gayle is actually, in addition to being the visionary and founder for the program, she has also taught quite a few classes. In fact, one of our teachers just is on a maternity leave right now, and Gayle has now found herself with a new job again. Yes. So this whole unpaid employment thing is wonderful. You can get as many jobs as you want. So why don't you maybe share a little bit about the program and maybe what types of kids are best suited for a program like this? Would be a good start.
Yeah, so we accept students between the ages of 18 and 25, and we kind of gave the range is pretty large because some students are ready to come at 18 and some students actually would benefit from more time in their transition program through their school district. So we kind of have a large range of students and ages, and we accept 10 to 12 students a year, depending on the cohorts and what's going on. Right now, next year we will be having 28 students on campus. So that's including our program is a 2-year program, but we've added an additional year 3, and then now we're adding an additional year 4. So the actual RISE program right now is 2 years. And it's a certification program. So the students take a lot of classes that are focused on just independent living, really understanding who they are, person-centered planning, honing in the areas that they are strong in and what they have passion for in terms of like future jobs. And they also do internships on campus the first year and then off campus the second year. And so we piloted the year 3 2 years ago, and we learned a lot. And so we decided to pilot again the second year because we wanted to really just get it so it's just perfect. And so now we're extending it to, so our program now includes year 3 for those that are interested in continuing. And so, yeah, it's an opportunity for students that have special needs to live outside of their parents' umbrella, to learn alongside life skills with every other college age student, where they're all falling on their faces and learning how to get back up and, having issues that they have to solve their problems in the same environment. Our students live in the dorms with all the other traditional students, and they participate in all things related on campus. So we are the highest paid, how do you say it?
The RISE program employs the greatest number of traditional students in the entire university. So not only is there, there's job coaches, but there's academic mentors,
the resident advisors in the dorms.
Employs quite a few students. In fact, one of the kids that is starting this year, first year student, is the manager of the football team there now. Absolutely loving it. It's been a perfect fit. But not only is it a great opportunity for these kids with special needs, it's touching the traditional college student in a way, and giving them experiences with the intellectually disabled community that they would not ordinarily have in a regular college setting. So, by, let's say, some architecture major serving also as a resident assistant to someone with special needs, that architecture major is going to go on, he or she might graduate and maybe run their own architecture firm, but at some point they're going to remember that experience. They're going to have the opportunity to maybe hire somebody or look for somebody with different abilities to work in their firm at some point down the road. So the expanse, or this touches a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and it's had a phenomenal positive impact on the university.
Yeah. And like Skip said, a lot, typically people would think, oh, it's education majors and probably psychology majors or special ed majors that tend to be our advisors. And honestly, we run the gamut. Like he said, architecture students all the way to exercise, sports, and science majors to pre-med. It's all the students, because our RISE students have made such a significant impact on the community. People go, I want to be a part of that. Like, how do I get in, to be a part of that? And so it's just been beautiful to watch from the standpoint of our students as well as the general community. So very proud of the way that Judson has embraced our population and has really they've been champions for us. So, yeah.
Well, Gayle and Skip, thank you for providing a brief overview on the program, and just to emphasize it's a 2 or perhaps a 3-year program now. It's residential. The students are living on campus, right? So they're getting what I would refer to as the full go to college away from home experience. Yeah. And it's integrated, right? That's the point that you're emphasizing, that the students are not segregated off into a certain dorm or living situation, but they're living, as all the traditional students are, and with all the benefits and pros and cons that go along with that as well. So it's just thrilling to see the program grow from its infancy. So thanks for sharing. So let's take a little bit different look at this education beyond high school, more from a national perspective. And Richard, if there is a way that you can sort of provide a 30,000 foot overview, and then maybe identify a couple of examples of best practices that you've witnessed, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's interesting to listen to Gayle and Skip, having the benefit of years of working in this field. It's interesting how we've kind of come full circle in a sense. Again, my initial work was, again, with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. There was a long history of residential schools for deaf students. And kind of a plus and minus of different education laws, especially IDEA, which mainstream students. A lot of students have gone into K through 12 settings, and sometimes they're the only student who has a disability. And they don't have any sense of community or any other peers to who are like them. So we hear stories as college students and older who tell us that, you know, they wish they had known some other people to learn things like coping skills and strategies and some of the different ways to succeed in school. So it's wonderful to see these programs like Judson's. And I know probably you have a connection with Think College, which is another federally funded program similar to the NCCSD. And again, in the Higher Education Act, there was additional language about ensuring that students with intellectual disabilities and other related kinds of disabilities were given opportunities for education beyond the K-12 setting. So from that, a number of programs have developed, and it's wonderful to see the ARISE program and its unique emphasis, which gives parents just one more option, because that is something we hear from. We do hear from students, from families, I guess, who are looking for a more specialized or more intimate kind of program than just having their child just, you know, dumped at a state university with 50,000 students. So it's great to see this kind of development. So that is one kind of big picture thing that we are observing. The other, and I do have a little slideshow that gives some tools. I don't know if we're ready to do that yet, but just from what we're hearing from families, one of the biggest needs is access to information, just to understand the whole transition process. And students, even those who are in special ed on IEPs, the families often, even though they're connected to those programs, they still don't know what the process or what the progress will be, especially after high school, when somebody might be interested in going to a post-secondary training or college or university. So that we still hear stories from families that are struggling, many who the students have gone to college, and that first year is a real struggle because they just don't understand the culture, especially for families who are first generation in college, which is an increasing number. There's a lot of people in the United States who are first generation going to college. So a lot of those folks are just ill-equipped for what's coming. So that's kind of the other trend that we hear from other trends for students. And again, I'm talking about a wide variety of students, deaf, blind, students who use wheelchairs, autistic students, all just the in college. And actually, David, let me know when it's might be appropriate to show. I just have one slide with some tools that might be helpful, especially for dads. But a lot of the students, even though there are laws in place concerning accessibility, a lot of students get pushback from faculty, programs, and it's just very inconsistent in the college setting, just because of the nature of the laws. The Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 are wonderful, but they're focused primarily on accessibility. making sure barriers are broken and taken down. But any kind of anything beyond that, like success in college, really isn't built into that part of the law. And that's really for others on campus to help with that, but many students don't know how to find those resources. So I did put together a little, just one slide that has a few things in it that are kind of tools, especially to share with your audience. So maybe I'll just share that so people get a sense of this overview that I'm talking about. And this, you can take notes on this or save this, or I could put this together as a little a resource for your audience. But the most important thing is just to understand the laws that govern the different educational settings. IDEA is an education law, and the ADA and Section 504 are civil rights laws. In IDEA, as the dads here are probably experiencing, the K through 12 setting is called upon to ensure that their children get free and fair, equal access to education. And some of that includes modifying programs, one-to-one instruction, that kind of thing. And there can be a lot of hands-on approach. And again, those who are in special ed on IEPs have a regular kind of progress to schooling. Those who are on what they call 504 plans have a similar type of thing, but they're not tracked as much, but they're ensured that they have accommodations. Once you get to college, though, ADA and Section 504 kick in. And again, those are civil rights laws that are concerned primarily with non-discrimination. So in the admissions process and in school, through school, students have rights to not be discriminated against simply because they have a disability. And I remember the pre-ADA realm when people with disabilities were just blatantly told, you can't be here in college or this job or whatever this is that you want to do. We don't take your kind here. We don't take blind people or deaf people here. So this really is has the civil rights law is very important to address discrimination. There are provisions in there for what they call accommodations, which is similar to IDEA, but in college, students have to come forward and be prepared to talk about what they might need to address the barriers that they're encountering in the college setting. So that's an important piece versus the IDEA. School districts are looking for the students in order to assist them. Just a quick piece here, just understanding college is another tool. Admissions as compared to the disability services. We hear this quite a bit, and it's interesting that when David and I were talking earlier, the approach that moms might take from dads. We hear some of those kind of anecdotal stories. Admissions needs to be non-discriminatory, but that means they just look at applications kind of equally. It's just what's on paper comes in, and students sometimes don't get a chance to talk about, this is what I did despite my disability. I was able to do these various things in school. Disability Services is the office, and they have different names on different colleges. It's the office that is the one that provides the accommodations, that works with students individually to ensure that they are able to access all of their classes and all the other activities on campus. Disability Services, though, does not have any impact on admissions. So in this next section here about preparing. It's important, and I'm jumping down a little bit, but preparing for like your campus visit. For a lot of times when campuses have these tours, they don't include the Disability Services Office. And I should share that I ran several of those offices at different universities over my career. And so the savvy parent should know to include a stop at the Disability Service Office in order to find out what kind of resources are there, what kind of offerings are there. But I always tell parents to start with, because ADA covers all schools, private and public now, just a few for-profit schools. There's some court cases related to that happening right now, but ADA does cover most post-secondary settings. Because of that, students now have the freedom to go wherever they would like to go. So I always encourage parents when they call me, where should my son or daughter go, is to start with asking the student, what do you want to do? What do you want to study? What do you want to become? Start there, because if the student's motivated in that field, they'll have a better outcome as they go along. And then from there, look at, do you want to be foisted into a large university? Do you want to be in a program like the RISE program, or anything in between? The other thing I really want to emphasize to families is to really use the transition services that are built into IDEA and special education. A lot of families don't know this, that part of this process is that you have a right to transition services. The people who do this may be at the school, they might be at the school district, they might be housed within special ed. So you do have to look for that and kind of push and demand, if you can, for services. I always encourage families to update the IEP in high school, at least by the sophomore year, if maybe the junior year, and then to update any disability evaluations you might have, especially by age 16, and I'll explain why in a moment. Another thing that most parents don't even know about, but a provision of the IEP is this document called the Summary of Performance. And before a student leaves high school, they have a right to a summary of all the services and programs, different experiences the student had in the K through 12 setting. And the transition specialist, might be a transition counselor, is supposed to put all of that together. And those three tools, that updated IEP, the disability evaluations, the SOP is what they call it, are all helpful for when you go to college or another post-secondary program, because disability services will want some documentation. Sometimes families, your child is first diagnosed when, they're 5, 6, 7 years old. And some families, they never update that. And a college will say, well, that's great. That gives a little history, but it doesn't give me a picture of how you might be functioning now as a young adult. That's why that age 16, age 17, because the brain has developed in different ways, it's really helpful to have that, because that'll help the Disability Services Office know what kind of accommodations would be appropriate for a young adult. And again, as I mentioned, campus visits, the other part of preparation is to talk about with your children, what questions do they want to ask of the college, both admissions. Usually in those admissions tours, there's not a whole lot of chance to do that, but most especially with disability services. I remember I've only had like maybe or 3 students who've actually done this, but they came in with a list of questions for me. Do you provide this? Do you provide this? What do I do if a faculty doesn't want to work with me for some reason? All of those kind of things. That was the best thing. The last student, I don't think I asked her if I could copy it, but she wanted to keep it. But those questions were great. That would be a good little tool to create for families. So I encourage that as well. This is just I'm just touching on things, but this is my program, and this is the URL for it, nccsdonline.org. And we have all kinds of information and resources there on transition and in college and all of that. So I hope I didn't go on too long, but that's kind of an overview from my side of the house here.
Richard, that was fabulous. Thank you for sharing. And I love that tool. It made it a little bit easier to follow the conversation. And one of the thoughts that comes to mind is that the RISE program is a residential program. The comments you were making for the most part seem to be traditional colleges, whether they're 2-year or 4-year programs. And I'm wondering, out of curiosity, if the community colleges are prepared or they're doing a similar or adequate job. And the reason I'm thinking about that is that not all individuals with disability would be able to go away from their families from a residential standpoint. And I'm wondering if there's something going on at the community college level that you can speak to as well.
Would that be for me or? Oh, sure. Yeah, actually, that is community colleges are a really viable option. Just the nature of them, they're smaller usually, and students can, you're not locked in. You can pick and choose. Actually, I started in a community college. I didn't have such a great high school record, so I went on to community college. And it was a great way to ease in before I transferred. Now, a lot of one issue with community colleges is those are state connected. So a lot depends on your state. I live in California, and it's a very strong education state. So their community colleges are very rich in what they offer, all kinds of programs. Illinois, where David is, also that's another great strong system. So just like any other kind of program that you might be exploring, you would need to visit the community college, go on their website, see what they offer. And there are some programs not as well developed as RISE and some of the similar ones, but some community colleges do have maybe some classes or some informal programs that would work with students of various kinds of disabilities, kind of to prepare them for them.
Thank you, Richard. So Skip, I want to go back to you, or you and Gayle, and get the parents' perspective on what we're talking about. Obviously you're involved with the RISE program, helping create that. And you don't even know if your daughters would be perfectly suited for that program. And I'm wondering if you can speak to what this looks like from a parent's perspective and what you're doing to prepare your girls through this sort of transition period that Richard was making reference to.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we've got a kind of a window into it in that, Gayle has had the benefit of seeing students interview for a position or a spot in the RISE program. And, although I haven't been in those personally, I'm hearing kind of some of the good and some of the bad and, kind of how those interviews play out. And I think one of the things that I would encourage parents to do is to create, start building that sense of independence and, set the goal out there for, as we probably would tend to do for our typically developing kids. Set the goal out there at an early age for our kids with special needs to for a next step beyond high school. I think that's a good thing. We're in a little bit of a unique situation. My two kids with special needs are very different. Jessica, our older one, probably would be a good fit for RISE, probably not right out of high school. A year or so of transition program, I think, would be in her best interest, just to mature and really to see her want to be out of the house. I think that would be a good thing. My younger daughter, although it's early to tell, she's 14 right now. A program maybe like a program at Shepherd's College might be a better fit for her. She's going to be a little less independent, and I think Shepherd's is going to have, maybe a more of a hands-on approach that will suit my younger daughter Cassidy a little bit better. But to get to your question, David, what I'm seeing is that the kids that are, and I'm saying kids, but really young adults that are best suited for the RISE program are those that really want it themselves. They're not going through this interview process because their parents are pushing them, but they've been prepped for this and they really want it themselves.
Well, thanks for sharing. That's very helpful. Richard, I want to go back to you and trying to put myself in the shoes of the dads in our network. There's 400 or 500 dads. Many of them have super young kids, so the issue is not right on the radar screen. Some are in the sweet spot, right? They have teenagers and they need to be thinking about transition, et cetera. And then some are, well beyond. They've got kids in their late 20s and 30s and beyond. So, but for those younger families, the ones where this is relevant, are there databases of schools, rankings of these schools, whether they be community colleges or 2 or 4 year programs, where whether it's AHEAD or one of the other organizations that's helping parents be able to filter these, either by the type of school they are or by the geographical location? What type of resources are out there for parents?
A perfect segue. One of the requirements or asks of Congress for this federally funded program I work at is to create a database just to answer that. And we've started that. It's called CEDAR, and there's a link to that at that homepage I gave you. And we've been working on contacting schools across the nation to respond to just the kinds of questions you just asked me. And we're asking for their history, their philosophy around education, but then also kind of drilling down to specific kinds of programs. So we're gathering that, and in this 7th year that's coming up, we're hoping to get that all polished up and out to everyone. In the meantime, I would look at also Department of Education is a good resource. If you just go to ed.gov, and you should find a link there to what they call the College Navigator. And that is similar to what we're doing, but that's been around a little bit longer. But that's just a database of all the universities and colleges and post-secondary programs. Pardon me. And that's more just for the general college, but at least you can get to them and you can find them by region, by the different majors. It's very rich with the kinds of information you find there. They've recently added links to the College Navigator for each of the disability services offices that are on their campuses. And sometimes you can go through that kind of office to find out if there is a specialized program. So, so I would tell, and I'm sure that happens at Judson, but I would encourage, the RISE program to connect with the disability office just so they know each other and can refer back and forth. That's one. Then there's two sources, and I could at some point, I can't talk and type, but maybe I could type it in the chat. There's two other sources I mentioned already. Think College, that they have their own college program search, which is again very rich. They've done a fantastic job of pulling those things together. The other are longtime colleagues of mine, work in the autism realm, and their site is called collegeautismprogram.com. And they also have it's not so much a search, it's more of just a listing of the programs they know of that are related to autistic students. So those are kind of the key ones that I usually refer people to.
Richard, thank you. I was just thinking about this. I wish we had had this conversation before lunch today. Coincidentally, very coincidentally, for the Rotary Club of Chicago, I had the privilege of introducing as well as doing an interview with Arnie Duncan, who's the not most recent, but close to most recent former U.S. Secretary of Education, a Chicagoan and very well respected in education circles. And one of the things that came to mind as I was reflecting about your comments is that the University of Illinois has a great reputation for catering to individuals with disability. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that, or if you know much about what the University of Illinois does and some of these other universities that were around from the very beginning, that adopted, either before the legislation was in place or really adopted the legislation more seriously than on average or most.
Sure, and I had mentioned this to David. That was another good segue. But U of I, University of Illinois, was pretty much the first public university to offer services to students with disabilities. Way back after World War II, when a lot of the soldiers were coming back, and many of them who had injuries were coming back on the GI Bill. Illinois stepped in and saw an opportunity there. And it's what they call a land grant institution. The Big Ten schools are land grant institutions. They also have a lot of space and a lot of land. So they started building with those students in mind, and quickly put programs together related mainly to, at that point, students with physical disabilities, but also hearing loss is another big disability, a result of war. So both of those kinds of programs started at Illinois. Since then, Illinois has been the leader. And when I was mentioning ADA, when that came on the scene, I was again at a big school, a Big Ten school, Minnesota, and we relied a lot on Illinois to collaborate with, let's design accommodations and let's work together. And they taught us quite a bit. But Illinois is, I think, one of the few that I can think of that has dorms that are designed for people with physical disabilities. And they have a similar kind of program to RISE, in the sense that they hire students there, many who are in kinesiology and other related fields, to work as personal care attendants in the dorms with the physically disabled students. So that kind of started that whole connection, disabled, non-disabled kind of thing. And again, it's a research institution, so they've done a lot of research on surviving with physical disabilities and technology, that kind of thing. So that Illinois really is a model. From there, there were some other, mainly in the 50s and 60s, some programs that launched for blind students and deaf students, especially in Rochester, New York. The National Technical Institute for the Deaf was founded there, and that enabled deaf students to study technology. Gallaudet University is actually much older than that, but that's a college for deaf people where they teach in sign language. For learning disabled students, Landmark College up in Vermont, I think it is. I know it's cold. Some area up there that's really cold in New England has been around for a long, long time. And they kind of took that model of the physically disabled students but applied it to students with learning disabilities originally, and now it includes students with attention deficit, autism, and others. And that they are kind of a leader in the design of programs to educate students with those disabilities. So those are some of those key developments over the years. Oh, David.
Thank you, Richard. Very enlightening. So in the few minutes that we have remaining, I'd like each of you just to reflect on some resources that maybe you haven't made reference to that you might suggest that a dad or a viewer of the YouTube that'll be produced from tonight's biweekly dad Zoom call can seek out. Skip, back to you.
One of the things that I would encourage dads to do is just, just believe in your kid to accomplish things that you might not think they can accomplish earlier on. And, my kids never cease to amaze me at what some of the things that they can progress in that, you would have no idea. Give them the freedoms to explore and to do things that will help them develop as a person. Like one of the examples, we've had some kids that have applied to the RISE program that just haven't had any experience using a smartphone. Well, and maybe that's something that sounds like a luxury, but really in the world of disability, it's the way that it's one of the ways that we can kind of keep track of the kids in the RISE program, communicate with them, and all those things. It's almost a prerequisite to be part of the program. So, I would just say, take advantage of the technology that's out there and leverage it to the greatest extent you can, and believe in your kids.
Good, solid advice. Thank you, Skip. Richard, we're going to give you the last word.
Sure, and I put in just a few things in the chat, but also I wanted to add another overarching one. It's under the Department of Education, but the Office for Civil Rights. So it would be ed.gov/OCR. That's a really important office and resource to know about because the Office for Civil Rights oversees compliance with disability law. And they're the ones who will investigate complaints that families might have or students might have, actually from K through 12 all the way to college. So they have a number of resources on their site. There's a great, well, they've had this forever, but a nice transition. It's called Know Your Rights in College. And they spell everything out that students and families should know for making that transition. So that would be a key resource that I would add. And I know it's interesting, I was talking with David earlier, moms and dads have different approaches when they call me or to address problems that they're encountering. Just kind of generally, this is a generalization. The mothers are trying to walk through the processes. I hear from dads who want to contact the president of the university right away, or another dad who he's not a lawyer, he did all this work trying to find all the laws related to disability. I had to talk him off the ledge and said, you don't need to know all that. Just contact the Office of Civil Rights and they'll do that work. That's my advice for both sets of parents.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Skip and Gayle, as well as you, Richard, for your time, the valuable insights, very enlightening. And we didn't cover all the bases, but I think that we covered a lot of ground, particularly for somebody who's just gearing up toward the transition timeframe before their son or daughter might be able to go on beyond high school. So I just want to say thank you again for sharing your time and many insights. As a reminder, the Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. We do a number of things to help bring dads together and enlighten them. One is the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcasts. We produce these on a weekly basis, and it's a rich resource for dads of all types. We put on these bi-weekly Zoom calls, which we archive on the 21st Century Dads YouTube channel. And we're preparing for our annual conference, which is going to be coming up in May, on May 15, 2021. So you can go to the 21stcenturydads.org website for information on all the above. Thanks for your involvement. Thanks for your support. And we hope to see you again at one of our future conferences.